All right. So we need to talk about presentations today. Now, a rough draft of your presentation is due the last day of class. So for us, that is next week. So for us in this class, it's a Wednesday, right? Just as long as it's in, and you can just submit it to the same assignment folder that you're going to submit your report to next week also. And so for you guys, your report's going to be due on Monday. That's a final version of the report. And what that does is it kind of sets a hard deadline on, the report's done and taken care of. And that way you can focus the rest of your efforts on getting ready for your presentation then. The presentation itself is the following week. So for us, that's going to be Wednesday. So a week, 2 weeks from today is the actual presentation. So a rough draft due to a week from today. Feel free to make adjustments, modifications, changes as you need to. As you guys get together, you practice, you kind of iron out your bugs. That's the reason the timing is set up that way. Get done with the report. We know what we're going to do with that. Focus the rest of our time getting polished up, ready for the presentation. Okay. I'll invite some faculty members. I'm sure our client will be there as far as I know. I'll double check with him, and some of the physics faculty may be here, some of the math faculty. I mentioned last time, if you really want to score points with the math faculty, any math that you've done, talk about that. That always makes those guys happy. I've got a few people that I work with at Tinker. I will invite some of them. I will be fairly aggressive about trying to keep a somewhat small group. I don't want you guys to feel overwhelmed like this enormous audience. Okay. I will do my short of kicking people out. I'll do my best to kind of keep it to a reasonable size group, but there might be as many as 10 guests. Okay. That's kind of the upper end. I don't expect that many, but it's one of those, I'll throw a big net. And if I catch a bunch, I catch a bunch. I'll should be able to keep it no more than that. I expect 2 to 4 is normally kind of what we see. Yes.
Does dress code matter?
Yes, that's one thing that's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, we'll talk about dress in just a second. Absolutely. Let's see. The other thing, there's something about guests. Oh, if you have a faculty member in a class that you want to encourage to attend, that's fine, especially if it's a science or a math class or something like that. If I do ask the faculty members that join us to fill out a scorecard, we can look at that in just a second. So if you've got a chemistry faculty or some sort of science or math faculty, you think it's going to be a pushover and give you all tens, that's okay. I'm fine with that. So if you want to actively recruit guests, I'm perfectly fine with that. Yeah, as far as logistics of the presentation, 5 to 15 minutes is what I would suggest. Aim for 10 minutes. Keep in mind, all of you are going to get a little bit nervous. You're all probably going to go a little bit fast. You'll probably leave out things you intend to put in. So if you aim for 10 minutes as a group and everybody gets a little nervous and goes a little fast, you should still hit 5 minutes with no trouble. If you have some hiccups, something doesn't quite load or go the way you think it should, if you've aimed for 10 minutes, you shouldn't have any trouble staying within 15 minutes, right? So that's what I always tell groups is aim for 10 minutes. I reserve the right to penalize you if you go way beyond that. The 2 horror stories I tell is I had a graphics group one time. I think they went about 2.5 to 3 minutes is all. Project you've been working on for over a month and there's 4 of you and you can only muster up 2.5 minutes. They just didn't take it seriously, and that's fine. They were score reporting. I was happy to do that. I had an intro group one time. I think the record is 25 minutes and 14 seconds. Yeah, they lost some points. Complete disregard for the time, complete disregard for everybody else's time. 5 to 15 minutes, right? If you're 15 minutes and 5 seconds, I'm probably not going to hammer you. If you're 18 minutes, you're probably going to lose a little bit. Okay, so work together amongst your group. If you know you're going to be running long, maybe have some kind of signal or something that you can tell each other, hey, your 5 minutes they're up. whatever works for you guys. That's part of the reason I want you to have a rough draft of your presentation to me early before the presentation. So you as a group work on your logistics, make sure you know how it's going to go for you, know where your trouble spots are. The guests will ask you questions. In general, it's pretty rare I have somebody in here that's really trying to make you look dumb. They're asking honest, genuine questions. Keep in mind, most of these are going to be faculty members. They're just as interested in your success as I am. Okay, so don't let that intimidate you. But with that said, be ready for the questions. So but they're probably going to ask you stuff that you really should know. So the questions do not count in this 5 to 15 minute range. Okay, so they'll ask you questions. Once you're done and you turn it over the questions, I stop your clock. So with 3 groups, no more than 15 minutes each, and some questions, an hour-ish is kind of what we're expecting. Okay. Let me double check on room location. I mean, worst case scenario, we do it here, which isn't a bad case scenario at all. I think the engineering classroom downstairs where the 3D printers are, I think that'll be available in this time slot. Let me check a few things before I pull the trigger on that. But if we can move down there, we'll probably move down there. And it has a smart board in there, so you can actually like swipe to advance the slides. It's got a quick wireless keyboard and mouse. Feel free to take some time and actually practice on that machine so you get a feel for the technology. I do expect each group member to talk some. Does not have to be evenly distributed. If you've got one group member that's just really, really concerned or really, really worried, and you want to carve them out a small, kind of more straightforward part, that's fine. Do what makes sense for your group. But I do expect I require each group member to talk some. I encourage you to not like cycle through. I basically carve it up into thirds, do each person's part, and move on to the next person. I always tell groups in this kind of a presentation, I've literally and figuratively seen people trip over themselves switching over and over again. If it's a 45-minute presentation or more, a big long presentation, you as a group working through and you want to rotate through something like that there's some situations that make sense. For a 10-minute presentation and there's 3 or 4 of you, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to keep rotating through. It's not a requirement, it's not a rule. If you've got a reason that makes sense for you to rotate through, that's fine. You're not going to lose any points. I would encourage you, unless you've got a very good reason, maybe avoid them. Question was asked about dress. My rule is this: a shirt that's got a collar on it, a nice pair of jeans, anything above that's okay. All right. You don't have to wear, if you got a nice blazer and you want to wear that, that's fine. That's kind of my style, but if that works for you, go for it. I encourage it. If you want to wear just a nice business casual, a pair of khakis and a button down, great. If you just jeans and a polo is perfectly fine. Just look presentable. I'm not asking you to go out and spend a lot of money. Wear what you got, okay? What I would encourage you to do is kind of talk amongst your group and have an idea about where everybody can be. I'm not encouraging you to come in wearing a uniform, right? If you want to, that's fine, as long as you look nice and presentable. I've had groups where everybody's in black pants, white shirt, no tie, and that's even there was one girl in the group, and even she did it. And I'm like, that's great, that's fine. If that's what you guys want to do, I'm fine with it. What I would encourage is don't be the group that has the one person in a suit and tie and everybody else is in jeans and polo. I've seen that. It's a bit distracting. It's not the end of the world, but I would encourage you, talk amongst your group, see what works for you. Again, for guys, jeans and a polo, ladies, whatever kind of is equivalent. If you need help and advice, I'm happy to do that. But again, I think in general, if I just say, make sure you talk amongst yourselves and kind of have an idea of what everybody can do, that's probably going to be good. Okay. If you have questions, let me know. So far, so good. That's logistics, right? All right, let's talk about what goes into the presentation. For you guys to kind of focus on your final design, and I know graphics groups will often ask me, can we show our prototype? Can we have our prototype? Yes, please. But that's kind of the whole thing is If you want to work with Mr. Lynch and actually set up an actual demonstration, that is perfectly fine. It's perfectly valid and reasonable. Use your best judgment. If you got questions, about setting up logistics, let me know. I'm happy to help with that. If whatever you think is going to be effective, that's what I would like us to be able to do as best we can. Okay. So, but yes, please show off your actual prototypes. Please have pictures of your prototypes and any drawings or CAD files in your presentation. Visuals help, actual hands, live demonstration helps. These are all good things. So whatever makes sense for you as groups in general is just fine. How do you want to divvy up the time? If you figure 10 minutes, about half the time probably spend on your final design itself, how it works, but also spend some time about how did you get to that final design. Keep in mind, again, I know I've watched you guys and printed for most of your prototypes, or at least worked with my technicians about getting your prototypes. I've seen the progression. I know what this looks like. That's part of the reason I ask other people to come in and help me evaluate you. Because I want to see how well do you explain to somebody that's not familiar with your project. How did you get from when Mr. Lynch pitched you his ideas to whatever it is you're presenting as your final design? What does that process look like? So about half of your time spend probably on how did I get from what Mr. Lynch presented as his need to what we think is our final design, and about half the time, what is your final design? That's not a rule, just a ballpark suggestion. If it's 80% preparation, 20% final design because it's really simple, that's okay too. It's whatever makes sense for you as your group on that particular set there. Don't put every single word you're going to say on your slides and simply read the slides when it's your turn to talk. You can assume your audience is literate and they are capable of reading the slides themselves. You should limit the amount of text you put on a slide, organize your text into bullet thoughts, and don't use one large paragraph. Also, you should be careful to make sure you use a font size that's big enough to be read by the entire audience. Also, be sure to make eye contact with the audience. Right? Don't do this. I don't know how much more I need to say there. Don't do this. Remember when we talked about synthesis? We talked about the design process and the step in there about synthesis, about how we generate new ideas and try to come up with good creative solutions. I said brainstorming is a very common way we do synthesis. Another really good way to do synthesis is what we call inversion. How can I make it suck? How can I make this really bad? Think about all the worst presentations you've ever seen. Make a list. Don't do those things, right? How can I make this better? Well, make a list of the things that are not going to make it good. That's a way to generate ideas. Very perfectly valid way to generate ideas. If you've got one group member that's kind of saying, hey, I'll put together the presentation, that's a very common thing. Somebody maybe that's very comfortable putting together, working with Google Slides or PowerPoint or whatever platform you want to use, or Canva even. If you've got one person that's happy to kind of actively take on that role, that's great. If that works for you as a group, that's fine. What I would encourage, if you're that person that's taking on that role, make sure you get with the other group members and kind of maybe either one-on-one or just as a group, but make sure that each of those group members has got what they think they're going to need on their slides. It needs to be a bit of give and take between what is going to be helpful to the audience and what's going to be helpful to that person that's presenting that portion of the presentation. If it's a topic that I know a lot about, some of you guys have had me in some other classes, you've seen I can go down rabbit holes on a subject that I know a lot about. I just need about 2 bullet points and I could spend 30 minutes on something, okay? If it's something I know a lot about. If it's something I don't know a ton about, I might need a couple of sentences so I don't forget some points. Or if there's a very important point that I need to make, I might put the entire sentence. And you're not going to know unless you do a lot of public speaking sometimes, what do I need on a slide to be comfortable, but at least have some thought about, you as an individual, what do you need on your slides, your portion of the presentation? What do I think I'm going to need in the heat of the battle, so to speak? And again, if you're taking on the role of putting together the presentations, make sure you've worked with the individual group members about, hey, what's missing on your slides? What would you like? Do you have a preference of how I put that together? Right. So we talked about teamwork. That's just a conversation that you want to have, one way or the other, whether you're the person putting it together or you're the person that's doing the presenting part. I love that this looks like absolute garbage on the video here, because that's kind of the point. Part of the reason I want you to give me a rough draft in advance is so you as a group have an opportunity to put it on a projector at some point. Projectors will generate colors just a little bit different than it does on your monitor. The monitor's not terrible. You can kind of read the monitor here. It's not great. You can see on the projector, especially yellows and light greens. Projectors normally, the way they generate that color is different than what your monitor does. So it's not always going to show up well if you don't put sufficient contrast, right? So just a little bit of darker background really can change the look. So again, send me a rough draft, put it on a projector. If you need help finding a room that's got a projector, I mean, I'd say work with Mr. Lynch. They're going to be wrapping up physics labs here pretty quick, where they're probably not going to be, those rooms are going to be lightly used. The classroom, the engineering classroom downstairs, there's large blocks of time when it's not really used. We'll find a time where we can put you as a group on a projector. And if you want, you can practice. And I'm not going to sit there and hover over you as you practice. And unless you want me to, I'm happy to do that. But if you don't want me to, I'm happy to just, okay, you guys logged in, you're good, and I'll get out of your way. Right? Part of the reason we're doing the rough draft of the presentation so you can make tweaks, adjustments, and you can practice as a group and get your bugs ironed out. Okay, so things like this, just make sure whatever you put together is going to show up just fine on a projector. And then anything that you put on your slides, go to the back of the room, the farthest away that you think one of my colleagues is going to be sitting evaluating you, and make sure everything that's on your slide can be read from just about anywhere in the class. I will tell you also, if we do move downstairs to 118, it is a little, the airflow in that room makes it a little bit, there's some noise towards the back of the room. So if you're up at the front of the room, you might talk a bit louder, or feel free, if you're the one presenting, to kind of walk out into the room a little bit. You don't have to stand up at the podium. So just a few things to kind of think about. But if you're going to put tables or graphs or charts or any kind of complex, any kind of calculations, less is more. The more detail you put on there, the harder it is to make big enough to be seen. And I've actually got a slide here at the end that I think is probably going to help drive that home, but I want to get a bunch of content on it. And sometimes you do that. If you're going to put a data table like this, and if it's more than about 3 or 4 rows and it's more than about 3 or 4 columns, it's number one, it's going to be tough to actually be legible towards the back of the room. Number two, very few people have their brains are set up, I would say, high enough IQ, but that's not entirely the only measure. Just simply the ability to mathematically draw graphs in their head, see data visually in their head, see trends in their head, past about 3 or 4 data points. Feel free to make a chart. But the same pitfall occur in a chart. If I make a chart, make sure my axes and any units are very large and very easily read. Whatever the default chart that PowerPoint or Excel is going to make, you're going to have to go back in and really adjust your font sizes to make it big enough to be seen. Okay, so again, just make sure you put whatever you want to present on a projector. Go sit at the back of the room, see what it looks like, not just at the front where you're presenting. Okay. I suggest PowerPoint for something like this. You can also use Google Slides as a perfectly valid way to go about this. You're also welcome to, I've had some groups that somebody in the group has a Canva subscription, and they use some of the Pro Tools in Canva. I mean, even the free accounts on Canva have some really nice templates. So there's all kinds of ways to put together nice, professional looking, or just effective visual aids. PowerPoint is a nice tool for doing this. There are plenty of built-in templates that look really nice. I know I normally just stick to a black and white one. There's some reasons for that. But you can actually, you can go crazy with it, or you go very simple with it. And I think you can generate perfectly effective graphics either way. There is what's called in PowerPoint, there's what's called the master slide, or the slide master. I think it's master slide in the current version. It's basically your template slide. And so if I put things on the master slide, let's say I've got a really cool team logo that somebody in the group's made, and you want to put that on every slide in your presentation. Go open up your master slide, throw that logo on your master slide, and then every slide that you insert in your presentation will have that. Or if you Just, you don't like the font size of the third level bullet point. You want to increase that. Go on your master slide, increase it, and then every slide you insert after that, those changes will be made. You can make changes to the individual slides. That's perfectly fine too. What else? Sorry, I need a bit of water there. Animation. Some of you guys have heard me get on my soapbox about animations and PowerPoints before. There's what's called animation schemes, or basically there's like a button you can click and it will animate your entire presentation to where you guys ever sat through long presentations where it's every bullet point, it's click, 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 click. Okay. This is my soapbox. Sorry, it is what it is. I think about animations in my slides kind of like hand gestures when I'm talking. If I'm moving my hands around all the time, like every time it's click, 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 all the time, in, out, every single slide, notice at some point it becomes annoying and distracting, right? But if you'll use it for emphasis, it's much like hand gestures. If I'm trying to get a point across and I use it then and only then, well, the newness isn't more. That's my soapbox. Notice the only place I've used animation in this whole thing. Right there. Because I'm trying to get a point across, right? I've animated this dark background to come in at a set, and then I'm bringing this in after that, okay? That's the only place in this entire presentation, a presentation about presentations, that I've used animations. That's custom animation, right? So you can actually go in and control individual components in your slides when you need them to come in, not just all the time where it's distracting, in my opinion. That's my soapbox. I'll get off it. Slide transitions. I used to not be a huge fan of slide transitions until I learned about the morph transition. If you haven't played with the morph transition, go YouTube cool PowerPoint morph transitions, and with just very, very simple things. Because what it does is things that are on one slide, but you want it to then change to on the next slide. So like if I've got a shape and I just want it to get bigger, well, I can have it small on the first slide and then bigger on the second slide, and I do the morph transition between the two, and it will, as you move from one slide to the other, it'll automatically grow and move, and some really cool stuff. I would strongly suggest spend 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, go watch some nice, reels or videos on whatever social media you use, or just YouTube. Go look for morph transition and some really simple, powerful tools very quickly. Give you some ideas and different ways you can do that. Not required, just a nice extra skill to learn. I keep knocking that off. My jacket's got. I've mentioned you're welcome to use, I don't care if you use PowerPoint, I don't care if you use Google Slides, I don't care if you use Canva, some other tool, Prezi's fine. In general, what I would suggest you, if you're going to use Google Slides especially, one thing we've run into with Google Slides with 3 groups, it's not too bad. Sometimes in my intro class, I'll have 4 or 5 groups and change them from one presentation to the next. We want that handoff to be pretty simple. With 3 groups, we do need to be aware, but it's not crazy. But the thing is if you're using Google Slides and you're just going to present off of the cloud, off your shared Google space, that means you're going to have to sign off whoever the first group was, and then you're going to have to sign into yours, and this computer, your Google's going to say, I don't know this computer, and you might have to authenticate, and we're going to have to sit there and watch you do this the whole time, right? If it's in a way that you can just simply export it from whatever service you're using, Canva, Google Slides, or whatever, if you can just export it as a PowerPoint file, then we just drop it on the desktop of this computer. When it's your group's turn to come up, you just double click and you're good to go. Okay. So just something to think about. Think about what that transition, because we're going to draw for random group order. You might be the first group, you might be the third group. Just just be aware of, you want to know what your handoff's going to look like and the fewer bugs. And also, if you've got it stored in your Google Slides, you got it stored in your Google Drive, but you also have an actual PowerPoint file, it's kind of a backup, right? Because one might not work. You never know. So more than one way when you get up here, and guaranteed something's going to go wrong, you've got your backup, you just go right over to it. Okay. Questions there? Does that make sense? Think about what your transition from one group to the other looks like. The other thing is, again, remember there will be guests in here that are not familiar with your your project. So, what I would suggest to you is make sure you go look at in the final project document how you're going to get graded. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give, especially my colleagues, the other faculty members that join us, I'm going to print out a sheet that basically has this information on it. I'm going to ask them to assess 3 scores to each group. And it'll be a score scale of 1 to 10. Right. So 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. Basically a C is a 7, right? 7 or 7, 7.5, somewhere like that. I'm going to ask them to assess your group on 3 categories. Quality of visual aids, so your PowerPoint, Google Slide, Canva, Prezi, whatever it is you're using. It says slides were easy and easy to read and understand. Information was relevant. Pictures were helpful. Score 1 to 10. And then delivery employees. I'm sure I've said this before. I'll re-emphasize it here. We are not expecting professional public speakers. This is not what you do for a living. I assume probably any of you. We're not expecting professional public speakers. We're expecting you to give it your best efforts. Okay. It's a wonderful opportunity for you guys to get some practice. So that way, when you've actually got to make a sale with a client, or you got to get, you've got a really good idea, you got to get across to your boss, your manager, your boss is on board, but we need your boss's boss to buy in. You got to do a quick presentation. All these high stakes situations. This is a wonderful opportunity for you in a low stakes situation to get some practice on that. Okay, and that's our goal here. So delivery employees, are you loud and clear? You making a good solid attempt to be loud and clear, good solid attempt to make some eye contact as you're doing your presentation. Again, think about the things that make you a terrible public speaker and try to not do those things. And that's all we ask. And then effectiveness of presentation. So this is kind of the main point I really wanted to make is, again, you're going to have people that are not familiar with your project. Make sure it's clear to those people what you're trying to do and why. And because they're actually going to score you on that. Okay, so whoever you put in charge of that portion of your group's presentation, make sure they have what they need on their slides to be effective. And, make sure you as a group kind of help them be prepared to do that portion of the presentation. In my intro class, I've definitely seen I've seen judges make this comment on the other faculty members that helped me evaluate the intro class, because in my intro class, they're all doing the same project. And again, they draw for random group order. And it's been more than once I've seen the judges have written, it was the 3rd group before I actually understood what they were trying to do. Even though every group's doing the same thing, the first 2 groups really did a terrible job explaining what they were trying to do and why. And again, that's one of the categories you're being scored on. So just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. Visual aids. You guys get the cool tools. This is literally stuff I threw in ChatGPT with like 2 prompts. I'm like, I need some graphics for my intro and my graphics and design class. My intro group is picking up golf balls, put them in an elevated basket. My graphics class is making things to 3D print. And it says, here you are. And it gave me some cool graphics. And it's like, would you like me to make you a graphic about how to prompt AI generators to get good graphics? Yes, please give me a nice graphic that I can just dump in there of how do I make good prompts to AI. One thing I'm learning with, that is kind of good practice with using generative artificial intelligence is tell that generation program, whether it's ChatGPT or some specific image generator or whatever it is, tell it how you want it to behave, right? How do you want it to behave? You want it to be a professional graphic artist that you're contracting, or you just want it to generate graphics like an engineering student would, or whatever it would be. Tell it what kind of, what kind of person you're wanting it to replace, basically. Give it as much specifics as you can. And then if it doesn't give you what you want, tell it what you don't like about it and see if it'll adjust it. You want more lighting. You want it to be less realistic. You want it to be more cartoony. You want it to be a little more humorous, whatever that might be. The more specific you can. And I definitely have encountered situations where I've been too specific and I've had to tell it, okay, let's forget this. Let's forget that. I will tell you, I literally in this, I love whenever people say, because it's so true, this is literally the worst it's going to be. Because had I tried to I just pulled these off ChatGPT, and I can tell you from experience, no less than 2 months ago, if it tried to put text in images, it was absolute garbage. There would be just complete hallucination, made up words. And I was really impressed when it spit out. I didn't notice a single typo here, right? I mean, it's even putting quotation, like it's literally kicking it out like it would normal text. That's fairly new. I can't promise all your AI generators are going to do that. Some of them are going to be absolute garbage putting text on graphics. Okay. So if you want to notice it saying, hey, if you want it without text, tell me that. And I've certainly had to do that a few times because it was terrible at making text. Other tools, there are free editing, software editing apps out there. And we mentioned last time, if you're using SolidWorks, you can go in File, Save it as a JPEG or a PNG, and it'll take a snapshot of what's on the screen. I've had groups make really nice GIF animations where they'll take their design and they'll rotate it 45 degrees, snapshot, rotate it 45 degrees, snapshot. They'll make a string of images, throw them in a GIF generator. And then if you insert a GIF in an animated GIF into your presentation, when you're in presentation mode, it'll actually play it. Right? So a very simple way of having a video. You can embed videos in your presentation. I can tell you from a lot of experience, it's very simple to, if I can find a GIF image that does what I need it to do, just throw that GIF image in there. Then I don't have to worry about, well, do I have to click on it to play? Is it actually going to play? Do I need to bring the video with it? Is the sound going to play? It's just GIF image goes, it's done. It does make your file bigger, right? It does make your file bigger. It's going to take a little longer to download if you're not careful, but yeah, I mean, I use Pixlr, kind of a cheap, free Photoshop clone, essentially a web-based Photoshop clone that I can actually go in and modify pixel by pixel an image. PowerPoint itself actually does some very rudimentary image generation. You can right-click a bunch of items in PowerPoint and go save picture as, and it'll export it as a picture. Anyway, lots of tools available. Please feel free to put good graphics in there. If you need help, you want suggestions, I'm happy to do that with you. Questions, comments, complaints? You guys know what to do. I'll get out of your way.